What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Andy's History Lessons. So today, in the spirit of Halloween, we're going to talk about something scary that happened in history. We're going to talk about Uruguayan Flight 571. So here we go. Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 was the chartered flight from Montevideo, Uruguay to Santiago, Chile that crashed in the Andes Mountains on Friday the 13th in October of 1972. The accident and subsequent survival became known as the Andes Flight Disaster, as well as the Miracle of the Andes. The flight was carrying 45 passengers and crew, including 19 members of the Old Christians Club rugby union team, along with their families, supporters, and friends. 3 crew members and 9 passengers died immediately. Several more died soon afterward due to the frigid temperatures and the severity of their injuries. The wreck was located at an elevation of 3,570 meters or 11,700 feet in the remote Andes of far western Argentina, just east of the border with Chile. Authorities flew over the crash site several times during the following days, searching for the aircraft, but could not see the white fuselage against the snow. Search efforts were canceled after 8 days. The aircraft departed Carrasco International Airport on October 12, 1972, but a storm front over the Andes forced them to stop overnight in Mendoza, Argentina. Although there is a direct route from Mendoza to Santiago 200 kilometers to the west, the high mountains require an altitude of 25,000 to 26,000 feet, or 7,600 to 7,900 meters, very close to the plane's maximum operational ceiling of 28,000 feet or 8,500 meters. Given that the aircraft was fully loaded, this route would have required the pilot to very carefully calculate fuel consumption and to avoid the mountains. Instead, it was customary for this type of aircraft to fly a longer 600-kilometer, 90-minute U-shaped route from Mendoza south to Malargüe using the A7 airway. From there, aircraft flew west via the G17 airway, crossing Planchon to the Curicó radio beacon in Chile, and from there north to Santiago. The weather on October 13th also affected the flight. On that morning, conditions over the Andes had not improved, but changes were expected by the early afternoon. The pilot waited and took off at 2:18 p.m. on Friday the 13th October from Mendoza. He flew south towards Malargüe radio beacon at flight level 180, 18,000 feet. La Gurara radioed Malargüe airport with their position and told them they would reach 2,515 meters high Planchon Pass at 3:21 p.m. Planchon Pass is the air traffic control handoff point from one side of the Andes to the other, with controllers in Mendoza transferring flight tracking duties over to Padahuel air traffic control in Santiago. Once across the mountains in Chile, south of Curicó, the aircraft was supposed to turn north and initiate a descent into Padahuel Airport in Santiago. Given the cloud cover, the pilots were flying under instruments meteorological conditions at an altitude of 18,000 feet and could not visually confirm their location. While some reports state that the co-pilot incorrectly estimated his position using dead reckoning, he was relying on radio navigation. The aircraft's VOR DME instrument displayed to the co-pilot a digital reading of the distance to the next radio beacon in Curicó. At Planchon Pass, the aircraft still had to travel 60 to 70 kilometers to reach Curicó. Regardless, at 3:21 p.m., shortly after transiting the pass, La Gurara contacted Santiago and notified air traffic controllers that he expected to reach Curacao a minute later. The flight time from the pass to Curacao is normally 11 minutes, but only 3 minutes later the co-pilot told Santiago that they were passing Curacao and turning north. He requested permission from air traffic control to descend. The controller in Santiago, unaware the flight was still over the Andes, authorized him to descend to 11,500 feet. Later analysis of their flight path found the co-pilot had not only turned too early, but turned on a heading of 14 degrees when he should have turned to 30 degrees. As the aircraft descended, severe turbulence tossed the aircraft up and down. Nando Parado recalled hitting a downdraft, causing the plane to drop several hundred feet and out of the clouds. The rugby players joked about the turbulence at first, until some passengers saw that the aircraft was very close to the mountain. That was probably the moment when the pilots saw the black ridge rising dead ahead. Robert Canessa later said that he thought the pilot turned north too soon and began the descent to Santiago while the aircraft was still high in the Andes. Then he began to climb until the plane was nearly vertical and it began to stall and shake. The aircraft ground collision alarm sounded, alarming all of the passengers. The co-pilot applied maximum power in an attempt to gain altitude. Witness accounts and evidence at the scene indicated the plane struck the mountain either 2 or 3 times. The co-pilot was able to bring the aircraft nose over the ridge, but at 3:34 p.m., the lower part of the tail cone may have clipped the ridge at 4,200 meters. The next collision severed the right wing. Some evidence indicates it was thrown back with such force that it tore off the vertical stabilizer and the tail cone. When the tail cone was detached, it took with it the rear part of the fuselage, including 2 rows of seats in the rear section of the passenger cabin, the galley, baggage hold, vertical stabilizer, and horizontal stabilizers, leaving a gaping hole in the rear of the fuselage. 3 passengers, the navigator and the steward, were lost with the tail section. The aircraft continued forward and upward another 200 meters for a few more seconds when the left wing struck an outcropping at 4,400 meters, tearing off the wing. One of the propellers sliced through the fuselage as the wing it was attached to was severed. 2 more passengers fell out of the open rear of the fuselage. The front part of the fuselage flew straight through the air before sliding down the steep glacier at 350 kilometers an hour, like a high-speed toboggan, and descended about 725 meters or 2,380 feet. When the fuselage collided with a snowbank, the seats were torn from their base and thrown against the forward bulkhead and each other. The impact crushed the cockpit with the 2 pilots inside, killing Faradas immediately. The official investigation concluded that the crash was caused by controlled flight into terrain due to pilot error. The plane fuselage came to rest on a glacier at 34 degrees west at an elevation of 3,570 meters or 11,710 feet in the Malargüe Department, Mendoza Province, Argentina. The unnamed glacier, later named Glaciar de las Lágrimas or Glacier of Tears, is between Mount Sosneado and 4,280 meters or 14,040 feet high Volcán Tinguiririca, straddling the remote mountainous border between Chile and Argentina. It is south of the 4,650 meters high Mount Celer, the mountain the survivors later climbed and which Nando Parado named after his father. The aircraft was 80 kilometers east of its planned route. Now we're getting into the scary stuff, the cannibalism part. The survivors had very little food: 8 chocolate bars, a tin of mussels, 3 small jars of jam, a tin of almonds, a few dates, candies, dried plums, and several bottles of wine. During the days following the crash, they divided this into small amounts to make their meager supply last as long as possible. Parado ate a single chocolate-covered peanut over 3 days. Even with this strict rationing, their food stock dwindled quickly. There was no natural vegetation and no animals on either the glacier or nearby snow-covered mountain. The food ran out after a week, and the group tried to eat parts of the airplane, such as the cotton inside the seats and leather. They became sicker from eating these. Knowing that rescue efforts had been called off and faced with starvation and death, those still alive agreed that, should they die, the others might consume their bodies to live. With no choice, the survivors ate the bodies of their dead friends. Canessa later described the decision to eat the pilots and their dead friends and family members. Quote, "Our common goal was to survive, but what we lacked was food. We had long since run out of the meager pickings we'd found on the plane, and there was no vegetation or animal life to be found. After just a few days, we were feeling the sensation of our own bodies consuming themselves just to remain alive. Before long, we would become too weak to recover from starvation. We knew the answer, but it was too terrible to contemplate. The bodies of our friends and teammates, preserved outside in the snow and ice, contained vital, life-giving protein that could help us survive. But could we do it? For a long time, we agonized. I went out in the snow and prayed to God for guidance. Without His consent, I felt I would be violating the memory of my friends, that I would be stealing their souls. We wondered whether we were going mad even to contemplate such a thing. Had we turned into brute savages, or was this the only sane thing to do? Truly, we were pushing the limits of our fear. The group survived by collectively deciding to eat flesh from the bodies of their dead comrades. This decision was not taken lightly, as most of the dead were classmates, close friends, or relatives. Canessa used broken glass from the aircraft windshield as a cutting tool. He set the example by swallowing the first matchstick-sized strip of frozen flesh. Later on, several others did the same. The next day, more survivors ate the meat offered to them, but a few refused or could not keep it down. In his memoir, Miracle in the Andes, 72 Days on the Mountain and My Long Trek Home, Parado wrote about this decision. Quote, "At high altitude, the body's caloric needs are astronomical. We were starving in earnest, with no hope of finding food, but our hunger soon grew so voracious that we searched anyway, again and again. We scoured the fuselage in search of crumbs and morsels. We tried to eat strips of leather torn from pieces of luggage, though we knew that the chemicals they'd been treated with would do us more harm than good. We ripped open seat cushions hoping to find straw, but found only inedible upholstery foam. Again and again, I came to the same conclusion. Unless we wanted to eat the clothes we were wearing, there was nothing here but aluminum, plastic, ice, and rock." Parado protected the corpses of his sister and mother, and they were never eaten. They dried the meat in the sun, which made it more palatable. They were initially so revolted by the experience that they could eat only skin, muscle, and fat. When the supply of flesh was diminished, they also ate hearts, lungs, and brains. All of the passengers were Roman Catholic. Some feared eternal damnation. According to Reed, some rationalized the act of cannibalism as equivalent to the Eucharist, the body and blood of Jesus Christ under the appearances of bread and wine. Others justified it according to a Bible verse found in John chapter 15, verse 13. "No man hath greater love than this, that he laid down his life for his friends." In the end, all of those who had survived as of the decision to eat the bodies did so, though not all without reservations. Javier Methal and his wife Liliana, the only surviving female passenger, were the last survivors to eat human flesh. She had strong religious convictions and only reluctantly agreed to partake of the flesh after she was told to view it as, quote, like Holy Communion. Avalanche. 17 days after the crash, near midnight on October 29th, an avalanche struck the aircraft as the survivors slept. It filled the fuselage and killed 8 people: Enrique Platero, Liliana Mathal, Gustavo Nikolic, Daniel Maspons, Juan Menendez, Diego Storm, Carlos Roque, and Marcelo Perez. The death of Perez, the team captain and leader of the survivors, along with the loss of Liliana Methal, who had nursed the survivors like a mother and a saint, were extremely discouraging to those remaining alive. The avalanche completely buried the fuselage and filled the interior to within 1 meter of the roof. The survivors trapped inside soon realized that they were running out of air. Parrado found a metal pole from the luggage racks, and they were able to get one of the windows from the pilot's cabin open enough to poke a hole through the snow, providing ventilation. With considerable difficulty on the morning of October 31st, they dug a tunnel from the cockpit to the surface, only to encounter a furious blizzard that left them no choice but to stay inside the fuselage. For 3 days, the remaining survivors were trapped in the extremely cramped space within the buried fuselage with about 1 meter headroom, together with the corpses of those who had died in the avalanche. With no other choice, on the 3rd day they began to eat the raw flesh of their newly dead friends. Parrado later said, quote, "It was soft and greasy, streaked with blood and bits of wet gristle. I gagged hard when I placed it in my mouth." These poor people had to endure 72 days of trying not to freeze to death. And the only reason why they were found was 2 of these survivors climbed the rest of the way over the mountain into Chile and managed to find help and managed to get a team back to the survivors. Okay, guys, that is it. This concludes our Halloween episode. Please remember to like, follow, share, and subscribe. Peace out, rock on, happy Halloween.